The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Money Radio staff, management, or advertisers, and do not represent an offer to buy or sell any securities. Some interviews heard on this program may be sponsored by the participants. It's time for Health Futures with Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. We come at you live every Friday from the Scottsdale Air Park Money Radio Studios, 1510 AM, 105.3 FM, and the World Wide Web at moneyradio1510.com. If this is the first time you are tuning in, our show is about how our older adult population can live a healthier, happier life. We've been coming at you for almost 7.5 years, have done about 300 shows here. And what makes this show extraordinary is we bring extraordinary guests here to the show, and today is no different. Today we're going to talk about in-home care. Some refer to as non-medical. This is the business that Cypress Home Care Solutions is in, and we don't really take enough to really talk about this, and I felt like this would be a great day to take an opportunity to talk about the great work that home care agencies like Cypress are doing. More importantly, the caregivers that we employ, the work that they're doing on the front line, and how they are making a difference in people's lives. So today's discussion is going to be about home care in a pandemic storm. And I am really blessed to have three extraordinary guests here on the show, and I'm going to introduce them, and I'm going to get them to say hello. So I have Andrea Cohen, who is the co-founder and CEO of Houseworks. She's located up in New England. Andrea, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. And I've got Neal Kursban. He's the CEO of Family Nursing Care. They're over 50 years old. They've been around a long time, but this guy, he's not even quite 50 years old. But, you know, the legacy planning, he's the leader there. He's the CEO, and he's coming at us from the Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia area. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Bob. Looking forward to it.
Neal, it's good to have you. And then lastly, I've got Daniel Gottschalk. He is the co-owner and president of Family Tree In-Home Care. He's located out of Texas. I believe you're in Houston, or is it Austin, Daniel?
I'm in Houston. Nice to be here.
In Houston. Well, welcome to the show. Great lineup here, and really what we want to do is talk about home care during this pandemic. You know, the stats are just overwhelming. 80% of the deaths in our country are 65 years and older. Here in Maricopa County, the county that we serve here, Cypress Home Care, 66% of the deaths have occurred in long-term care facilities. And home care is a great solution for those that are looking to be able to care for their older parents, older loved ones, and it's a great solution to have out there. So I want to just really get a chance to talk to these three incredible operators. They've been around a long time and making a difference in the communities that they serve. And as one of the things as a result of this pandemic is this crazy acronym that we hear every single day called PPE, and that's personal protection equipment. And I will tell you, as a agency owner, we've been around for 26 years. We really haven't had to even fuss around with PPE because it's something that just hasn't really been needed because we haven't had the challenges with infection control as we've had. So the three of you guys have now become somewhat experts, and you're procuring PPE. Andrea, I'm going to look to you. Tell me about your experience with PPE. It is really consuming a lot of time, and I would love to know what you guys are doing in terms of acquiring PPE and being able to make it available for your care workers.
Sure. First of all, as a side note, the PPE is being delivered to my garage. So we've gotten an armed guard now because it's all sitting in my garage. But yeah, like you said, Bob, PPE is something we just didn't spend a lot of time with, and then it sort of became a full-time job because in the beginning of the pandemic, no one knew where to get it. We didn't know how much it was supposed to cost. think I can speak for all of us on this call that, one of our foremost issue right now is keeping our caregivers safe. And the way to keep our caregivers safe is to give them PPE. So we've come up with a number of protocols about what PPE has to be worn, how often it's worn. But I think my big takeaway on PPE is that you can write down all the protocols and do everything you need to do, but you've really got to teach these caregivers, these home health aides that go into the home, how to put it on and off. Because if you're not putting it on and off right, it's just not going to work. So we're working really hard to do that and make sure that everybody that we employ is properly protected, and the clients are also properly protected.
And I liked how you said, properly protecting the caregivers as well as the clients. And again, this is so new for all of us. Andrea, you've been in the business how long now?
Over 20 years, maybe closer to 25.
And have you ever experienced anything with PPE before?
Nothing. I mean, I've never experienced anything like this before at all.
And for our listeners, I want people to understand in-home care, and a lot of times people confuse us with home health care. In-home care is where we enable older adults to be able to age successfully in place. And how do we do this? We do this by providing extraordinary caregivers that come in and they assist. And the word assist is the optimum word. They help them get dressed in the morning. They help them get bathed or showered. They get them meals, and they remind them to take medications. They assist them, in walking and ambulating, preventing falls. They drive them to appointments, provide companionship. A lot of people don't really even realize this industry exists. And what I want to do with this show here today, and even throughout this pandemic, is to allow people to understand that there are options. And the options aren't just going into a community setting. So with that, I want to talk a little bit more about PPE, and I'm looking at you, Daniel. Tell me about your experience in Texas and dealing with this PPE and acquiring that and getting enough PPE for your workers.
Yeah, the first problem is getting it, right? And for us, we relied on a half dozen different people really around the country to try and provide PPE for us. But that meant wading through being defrauded on fake promotions of PPE, deliveries that never got that never actually made it through to our office. Maybe they're held up by customs. And so just getting them, and the price gouging was obviously the third issue, but just getting them was a nightmare. And when you finally get them, the next problem is getting them to your caregivers. We are not a logistics company for PPE. So we've got caregivers taking care of folks in their home and in senior living communities. How do we get the PPE to those caregivers? And we had a really hard time because our caregivers work really hard. They work crazy shifts and they have a hard time getting to the office. So we had to go and deliver PPE to them, which across our offices in multiple cities was an absolute nightmare. And so, yeah, it's a two-part problem.
So where do you stand right now? Do you feel like you have adequate PPE? And let's face it, I mean, what you have today, do you have enough for the next 2 weeks, the next month? Daniel, I don't see this as something that's going away anytime soon. And you and I probably participated on that HCOA call earlier this week. HCOA, by the way, is Home Care Association of America. And they've got a medical team that one of the doctors was talking about. We might be looking at this till 2023. And we all may be in the PPE business for that long, if not longer.
Yeah, we started slow, so we got initially about a 3 or 4 week supply to figure out who were the providers that could even deliver on the promise of getting us what we needed. And then once we figured those out, we doubled down on those orders, and we're now sitting with about 2 months supply. And I would tell you, it took us about 3 or 4 weeks just to get it out to the caregivers.
We get about
it was tough.
Thank you for sharing about 2 months supply. And Neal, we've got about a minute before we close this first segment, but tell us about your experience with PPE and how much supply do you have on hand?
Excuse me, great question. So it's been challenging to say the least, to double down or piggyback on what both Andrea and Daniel have shared. And majority of PPE is made in China. And with them having been shut down, it did cause massive delays in getting the PPE. So fortunately, we have since caught up. We've actually spent, which is a lot for a private duty home care company, well over $75,000 on PPE, and that number just keeps going higher and higher and higher. And to your point, the price gouging, but that a desperation, it's like you do what you got to do. Everything you hear in the news is actually, well, we're living it, we're experiencing it. And the stress level of getting the PPE was off the charts. We have about a month or two supply on hand, but we've also, Daniel, turned into a logistics company, which we're literally studying what UPS and FedEx and Amazon, how they get stuff in and how they get it out and how to be more efficient, because to your point, this isn't going to end. This isn't ending anytime soon, unfortunately.
Well, and it's interesting because it is like a commodity. I mean, what you're going to pay for a mask today could be, double tomorrow, and it could be half the next week. So you've really got to stay on top of this. I told you guys it goes really fast. It's hard to believe we're down one segment. We're talking about in-home care during a pandemic storm. I've got three extraordinary guests here on the show. I've got Andrea Cohen. She's the co-founder and CEO of Houseworks. I've got Neal Kursban, CEO of Family Nursing Care. And I got Daniel Gottschalk. He is the co-owner and president of Family Tree In-Home Care. When we come back in the second segment, I'm going to have them talk a little bit about how they got in the business and a little bit about their businesses. Stick around. We will be right back.
Finally had to take the car keys away from Dad this week.
I don't think Mom's been taking her medication, and I'm concerned.
I can't juggle work, my kids, and go look after my parents. It's just too much.
Do you need help taking care of a loved one? Cypress Home Care is here for them and you. Bathing, meal prep, monitoring, errands, and more. Call Cypress Home Care, 602-264-8009, or go to cypresshomecare.com. Cypress Home Care. Help is here.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and if you've just tuned in, we've got an extraordinary show here today. I'm talking home care during a pandemic storm. I got three extraordinary guests here in the show. I've got Andrea Cohen. She's the co-founder and CEO of Houseworks. Neal Kursban, CEO of Family Nursing Care. And Daniel Gottschalk. He is the co-owner and president of Family Tree In-Home Care. And I really wanted to take this first part of the second segment to really have each of you talk a little bit about your background and your agencies and what you guys are doing in your respective areas. And really, if you want to further define home care like I did in the first segment, feel free to do so. And by the way, for our listeners that are just tuning in, and if you missed that first segment, go up to the Cypress Home Care website, click on the media button, third button down is radio show, and you can catch the first segment and 300 others that we've been bringing to you for the last 7.5 years. So, Andrea, I'm going to punt it over to you. Metaphor for the New England Patriots. There you go. So go ahead, Andrea.
Not anymore.
Because
Anyway.
TB12's not there anymore, right? I got it.
So I, as Bob mentioned, run a company called Houseworks, and we're a private home care company. And I am going to try to explain to you what private home care company means. But I founded the company over 20 years ago, and I was one of those people who had two parents that got sick and died within 6 months of each other, and it really wasn't looking pretty out there in terms of the kind of support I could get, and that sort of drove me to do to create this company. And it's just been this extraordinary journey, and I have been so grateful to be able to make an impact. As Bob knows, I started out a little bit differently than some. I started out as a social worker and learned how to run a business, and that brings a little bit of a different nuance to how we run the business. And anyway, so we have offices in Boston and Philly and New Hampshire, and we have about 400 caregivers in Boston. We have about total of about 600. And private home care means it's 100% out of pocket, except for us, we accept long-term care insurance. So to help people sort of understand what that means is when someone gets discharged from a hospital or a rehab center, oftentimes they go home and they use their insurance, but they need a lot more than what insurance covers. And that's where companies like all of ours here on this call today kind of fill in the gap. And that gap is just getting bigger because there's just less to go around on the insurance side, and the gap is getting bigger. And really what we try to do, and then I'm going to stop because I could just go on, and I want to give everybody else a chance, is to, I feel like we become the trusted advisor to the family. So 50% of the clients that we see need round-the-clock care. So we have pretty complex cases, and we become the eyes and the ears. The relationships that we create, this is such a relationship business, and the relationships that we create and that the caregivers that we send into the home create with the families is just so extraordinary. And most people come to us and say, there's no way my mother will accept service. And I always tell them, there's an art to accepting service, and we know how to do this, and we will coach you about how to do that. So, really love what we're able to do and the impact that we'll be able to make across the country.
And one other thing that you and I share in common is both of us are graduates of Ithaca College, fellow bomber. So big shout out to Ithaca College. So while we didn't overlap, we were one right after another. And that's really where we got our MBA in life, right there in Ithaca, New York. Hey, Neal, you and I have gotten a chance to know one another over the last, let's call it 10 to 12 years. You're a second generation leader for this company called Family Nursing Care. Talk to us a little bit about your business and your background and what you guys do.
Okay. So as you said, second generation. My mother, who, like Andrea, was a social worker and started the business. I think that's the DNA, right? I've been there 25 years. I can't believe I'm saying that. Also, I got my MBA, so it's kind of a combo social worker and the way to run a business. And our focus really has been on the caregivers. Caregivers. It's about, as nice as we have about 70 office employees, we have about 700 clients and about 1,300 caregivers. So it's great to have all these 70 people in the office, but in reality, the families care about the caregiver. Who's the caregiver that's in my house? Are they showing up? Are they reliable? Are they trustworthy? Are they able to do all the daily living activities that have been shared? And it's, we philosophically, intentionally pay them more than what they earn in the market, give them real health insurance benefits, 401k match, just everything to me and our company is about the caregiver, because there's so much turnover in our industry and the caregiver base. And I personally get much more upset if a caregiver would leave our company than if we lose a client for the wrong reason. And if we can focus and continue to focus on making it all about the caregiver, then our clients tend to be happy with who they have in their home. That's our DNA. We've been doing it for 52 years.
And it's working. It's absolutely working. So I love that that you are caregiver centric, because truly we don't have a business without caregivers. Daniel, tell us what makes Family Tree in-home care great. I know that you have a partner, Alex, who I've gotten a chance to get to know. Tell us how you got into the business and what you guys are doing and doing differently down in Houston and all throughout Texas as well as in Colorado.
Yeah. So I guess the secret there is I didn't found the company. That's the honest truth. My business partner did, out of his apartment, one client, one caregiver at a time, doing right by his clients. His mother had breast cancer and grandmother had dementia, and decided he was sick and tired of playing the role of caregiver and dealing with just agencies he wasn't happy with. So he did it himself. And back then, when the company was founded, we were in about our 10th year of business now. I was actually practicing law. I'm a lawyer by trade. And what drove me into the law is the same thing that drove me out of it. Is a man named Ross Lentz. He was my professor in college. I met Ross my first day of college, age 18, and by the time I was 19, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Had no wife, no family, no kids, and so myself and a group of naive students decided we were going to take care of Ross, and really he was never alone for 24 hours a day from the day diagnosis to the day passed. And so
Wow.
I was one of those caregivers. 3 days a week, I did the night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So I decided at some point in my legal career I wanted to do something I felt as good about as taking care of Ross, and so here I am.
Well, thank you for that work you're doing, and I'm sure Ross is looking down on you and very proud that this ended up being your calling. So thank you for sharing. We're getting ready to start our second half, but I want to tee this up real quickly, and we can come back to it in the second half. And let's face it, during this pandemic, this is a very lonely and anxious time for seniors. And I'm looking to the three of you guys to know what kind of services or resources have you found that really help our seniors. So, Daniel, why don't I start with you? We got a minute, so just get us kicked off, and we'll pick up on this in the second half.
So, as it relates to a pandemic, I mean, I think that our seniors are scared. So they want access to PPE, that medical equipment we were talking about. They want access to testing, and so finding them all the resources that they need to be successful at home, whether it's grocery shopping and disinfection, whether it's a transition home away from senior living, even for a short period of time to stabilize and then go back when they're ready to go back and they believe it's safe to go back. All those types of things are really important to families right now.
It certainly is. And how about you, Andrea? What have you found?
I mean, I've found that for all of us who feel like every day fuses into the next, for seniors, it's particularly difficult. So when we're working with families, we really try to help them understand that their loved one needs structure. There needs to be a beginning, a middle, and an end of the day, and we try to help them do that. And then I also feel they need the caregiver, the older folks need to understand that they're still needed.
Andrew,
so in order for them to still be needed,
I'm
on the phone.
I'm going to get you to finish up in the second half. We're at halftime at Health Futures. Stick around. We'll be back for the second half.
As we reach the bottom of the hour, we pause for a look at the world's news. Then we're back with Money Talk. We're Money Radio 1510 AM and 105.3 FM. Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and if you're just tuning in, we're in our second half here, and it is a special pandemic episode about in-home care and home care during a pandemic storm. And if you're just tuning in, I've got Andrea Cohen. She's the co-founder and CEO of Houseworks. I've got Neal Kursban, CEO of Family Nursing Care, and I've got Daniel Gottschalk. He is the co-owner and president of Family Tree In-Home Care. And if you missed our first half, you can go up to our website at cypresshomecare.com, click on the third button, which is media button, and the third button down is radio show. You can catch this show, first half, and about 300 others. So when we broke for the second half, I was talking to Andrea about how lonely and anxious seniors are presently, and what resources have you found to help? And I know you started, Andrea, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to finish some of the comments that you were sharing in terms of some of those resources that you're finding.
I think what I was just saying is that the seniors need to feel like they're needed. They're just often sitting there. They can't go out. They can't have visitors. They can't see their family. So anything that you can do, I've talked to families where the senior gets on some sort of a Zoom call and teaches their grandchildren how to cook or reads a bedtime story to them, and that couples back with my structure comment. But I think if you have to, I think everybody assumes that a senior can get on a Zoom call. Well, I mean, and that's like a big assumption right there. And it's almost funny how many family caregivers I've spoken to who have tried to teach their parent to get on a Zoom call or to figure out how to do that. It's just almost funny. And So I think we have to remember that a lot of seniors don't know how to use technology. And in the beginning, right when this pandemic started, we were telling families, go to the house, get that Zoom, show them how to do it, because you might not be able to get back there. But I'm waiting for a good Saturday Night Live skit on teaching seniors how to use Zoom.
I think
right?
that's great. Hopefully they're listening in. That is hysterical.
It's going to be, mark my words, next season we're going to see that.
I want to bounce it over to Neal. So Neal, what are you finding that in terms of services and resources that you have found to help?
Right. Well, I mean, even prior to the pre-COVID pandemic, there's been a lot of challenges around the social isolation of seniors already. So this is exacerbated at tenfold, I would say, at least. And so we have a holistic sort of mind, body, spirit, and have often been giving resources along those lines. Even the front page of our website, familynursingcare.com, there's a whole section on this very topic under COVID-19 news, combating isolation during COVID-19. So there's a lot of information just out there and resources to help people. Now, I'll give a few examples. Online games. In the mind part, there's online games. There's similar to this, there's publicly funded radio and television across America. On the body front, there's Go for Life workout videos, the YMCA 360 health and fitness videos. And on the spirit front, there's like Monterey Bay Aquarium webcams, Google and arts, culture, virtual tours of over 500 famous museums across the globe. There's just a lot of things out there that when you hear it, that makes sense, but just having it all consolidated, it seemed to be helping, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback from the families that we're redirecting over to our website.
Well, I want to build on what you're saying is, and I've talked about it a lot here on the show. 1/3 of our population, 65 and older, lives home alone. And it is predicted by Joseph Coughlin, who leads the MIT Age Lab, which is literally in Andrea's backyard. And they are developing all kinds of innovations there. He says that number by 2030 could stretch as high as 50%. And it is close to 50% in D.C. and Atlanta and Seattle and San Francisco. So social isolation is a really big issue, and it becomes even bigger as a result of this pandemic. Last week, we were talking long-term care facilities. I had 2 executive directors here of long-term care facilities. I had a resident in through a Google Meet call, and he was on the phone. And I want to build on what you said, Neal. He was talking about games, and what he does, he plays bridge every day. He plays bridge online, and he's in bridge games with people from Italy and from Israel and from England and from our country, and he finds it really fascinating and meeting all these people and getting a chance to play bridge. And that's one of the things that, innovation and technology can really help us do. As Andrea talked about Zoom calls, teaching older adults how to do Zoom calls, it can be very, very challenging. But once they've grasped it, and this gentleman, Mort Skult, 88 years old, and he grasps it and he lives it every day, which is really, really exceptional. So I want to go on to my next question here, and that is, what can the state and federal government do to better support home care right now? And Andrea, I'm going to start with you. What do you see, especially because you're very active in the state of Massachusetts? You're very active in our industry. What would you like to see, or what can they do more of to support home care right now?
Sure. I think we've talked on the show, there's the need for more testing, there's the need for PPE, so what I feel like our Home Care Association in Massachusetts and the National Home Care Industry Association, they're listening to what our challenges are, and they're trying to get people to sort of rally around specific issues. There's something from HCAOA now, that's the caregiver super advocate idea, where just, one of the things that we individually as a company do, similar to Neal, is, how do we rally around our caregivers that we send into the home, and how can we use a really difficult situation to really elevate the status of these in-home care workers? And I think that's really where the state and federal government can really help us raise the voice to congressmen, to everybody that potentially we could actually make an impact with. But like, just even I mean, I get emails every day from our home care association that's telling me if you need PPE, and like how we talked about before, in the beginning we didn't know what we were doing. It took a long time, and so I think picking up on our challenging issues is really important to us.
So we have about a minute. I'm going to bounce it over to you, Daniel. What would you like to see, from your great state of Texas and maybe even the federal government to help us out?
Yeah, I mean, I would repeat everything Andrea said. First and foremost, she's right on the money. In addition, there's a lot of discussion right now in national debate about appreciation pay and giving some kind of benefit, financial benefit and aid to different workers out there, including folks in the hospital. I like to see that extended to home care workers. I like to see them. I see agencies like ours doing appreciation pay. I know we have. I know Andrea has. I like to see the government, add on top of that and really double down on this population. It's so important.
So we have the HEROES Act, obviously, that is a bill that is being generated by the House, and it hasn't made it up to the Senate yet. But I know that is something that has got a provision in there for monies for frontline workers. And Neal's actually showing me a sign, and it says, "Caregivers, you are the real heroes." When we come back, I'm going to have him talk a little bit about what family nursing care is doing, and certainly what more can the state and as well as the federal government do for us to really make home care acceptable and resourceful and be able to help so many that are needing help out there to be able to age successfully in place. You're listening to Health Futures Taking Stock in You. I got Andrea Cohen from Houseworks, Neal Kursban from Family Nursing Care, and Daniel Gottschalk from Family Tree In-Home Care. Stick around. We got one more segment. We'll be right back.
Finally had to take the car keys away from Dad this week.
I don't think Mom's been taking her medication, and I'm concerned.
I can't juggle work, my kids, and go look after my parents. It's just too much.
Do you need help taking care of a loved one? Cypress Home Care is here for them and you. Bathing, meal prep, monitoring, errands, and more. Call Cypress Home Care, 602-264-8009, or go to cypresshomecare.com. Cypress Home Care. Help is here.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. We're in our fourth segment. And if you are just tuning in, you are tuning into an extraordinary show. I've got in-home care is the topic, and we're talking about home care during a pandemic storm. And in the first three segments, we covered a lot of territory. We talked about PPE. We talked about it being a lonely and anxious time for seniors. And we actually learned a lot about Andrea Cohen's business at Houseworks and Neal Kursban's over at Family Nursing Care and Daniel Gottschalk over at Family Tree In-Home Care. So when we left off in the third segment, we were talking about what can the state and the federal government do more to support home care right now. And I want to just toss it over to Neal. I know he started to talk about it. He showed us this extraordinary sign about caregivers are the frontline healthcare heroes. So over to you, Neal.
Okay. I mean, as far as the state goes, I'll just double down on what Andrea said again, which is testing, and PPE. I mean, that's the environment we're in, and it's not going away anytime soon. And so whatever the state is able to do to help push that along, I know they're focused mainly on hospitals and nursing homes, at least in the Maryland, D.C. area. Not sure if that's the case nationwide, but we look forward to being available, both of these more available to the private duty home care segment of the population, which is those that we serve.
So the one thing I do want to build on, and I want to share because I really think that states could help us immensely. And by helping us, they're going to help the community. And that is, we have a workforce shortage. We had it going into this, and we're having it even more so now. You know, the care workers that are making differences in people's lives, they're scared. And many of them aren't going into people's homes because we have care workers that are in their 60s and 70s. And many of them, as I shared at the top of the show, 80% of them are the ones that are passing away. So we need help to really draw people into this direct care workforce. So my appeal to the states out there is help us attract workers into this space. Help us get a message out to the communities themselves and saying, you know what, there's no better place to get started in healthcare than becoming a direct care worker. That's one of the things I would like to see. I also echo the PPE as well as the testing part. So as we wrap things up, I'm going to punt it over to you, Andrea, and I want to talk about what do you see for the future of home care? Andrea, we can't hear you, so you might want to turn your mic off. Are you live?
I'm
there
good
you
now.
go. There you go. All right, perfect.
The first time I screwed up on technology. That's
I know, and you were talking about the Saturday Night Live episode of Zoom calls, right? All right, punting it over to you.
Sure. I just wanted to say one last thing about what you said, Bob. And I think one of the things I've seen a couple of states do is shorten the CNA course so people can actually start going through a course faster to do just some of the very easy kinds of personal care. And I think that's got some legs too as we just try to get through this pandemic. But in terms of the future, as difficult as this pandemic is and as hard as it's been, it's really opportunistic for home care companies for lots of reasons. And we're just going to be called to just do a lot more in the home. And, in order for us to do that, my team has been thinking about what to do first. And that's, what we've been talking about to caregivers the whole time is supercharge our caregivers with useful information. And in order to supercharge our caregivers so they can do all different kinds of things with wearing PPE and doing what they need to do, we've got to offer them different kinds of training and career ladders, hybrid positions, bringing people in from the field. And, they've got to be technology proficient, because the next point I was going to make is that technology is going to be a huge play in home care now. And frankly, it doesn't matter how much technology you have if the person in the home who's the eyes and ears can't use the technology. So we have to be able to teach them how to do that and have patience. So, I feel like we're going to be able to do more in the home. We're going to be using technology, that families are going to get more information real time, and that we're going to, virtual care is coordinated and integrated on the client's behalf. And the best part about that is home care can be at the epicenter of that. So I'm really pumped for this, and I'm really looking forward to being able to get through this very difficult time, figure out what our new baseline is, and then move forward.
Love that. Daniel.
Yeah. I mean,
piggyback on that. She said it so beautifully, and it's hard to follow that act, right?
I never liked following Andrea anything.
Yeah, right.
She's fantastic. I will say one thing that Andrea's always taught me is innovate, and that's something that our industry is lacking, quite frankly. The four of us sit in very privileged positions of highly complex, sophisticated companies that can see around the corners, but the truth of the matter is that there's a very low barrier to entry to be in our space. It doesn't take a whole lot to get a home care license. And so because of that fact, you do have a lot of very unsophisticated players in the market. But I don't think the future of home care is going to look the same way. I think it's going to continue to evolve as the consumer needs and desires evolve. So we have to innovate. And innovation means a lot of things. It means technology in the home that we have to be able to train the caregivers to use, to be able to train the caregivers better, to support them better. Maybe it's sensors in mom's bed so that if you can't afford round-the-clock care, but only maybe 12 hours a day, the other 12 hours a day are monitored live by someone in a home care company that can see with sensors in the bed, mom hasn't moved in 6 hours. Let's go send a caregiver in there to go check on her. I mean, there are many ways this industry is going to change. And I think that, it's going to be fun to watch.
Neal, future of home care.
Yeah,
Tough
I
act to
think
follow, I know.
A lot of it is education. I would say the majority of clients that start care with us either kind of sort of knew about home care or didn't even know about it. So they're literally in crisis mode. Mom fell, broke her hip, is in hospital, goes to rehab, and then what am I going to do? And the adult children are working. So I think part of it is just educating, just more education to people across the country of the option of having a quote-unquote stranger into your home, a caregiver into your home to help your parents as they're aging and declining and need a little bit of help, so that if and when a crisis presents itself, it's not necessarily a crisis. So I think just education along the way is number one. Number two, we do have a tsunami of seniors. It's the baby boomer is older and older, and as you said, Bob, there's the caregiver worker shortage. There's so much we need to do to get more workers into this space. I believe it's the top job opportunity out there in America. Like there's already a huge need. It's only being enhanced, and we got to have more people entering the workforce in this space. And then I would say technology, and to give many examples around that, but the two of you already shared that. And then lastly, it'll be interesting to see what happens because so many older adults have moved into these senior living communities, and so right now there's a negative. And we started a segment about this whole show about nursing homes and the high percentage, but there's a difference between nursing homes and independent living and assisted living. And I think the general population doesn't know the difference, or doesn't know the nuances of the difference. So, I believe independent and assisted living are crucial. They need to continue, and I certainly hope they do. And I hope the fear of what's going on doesn't just say, "Oh, forget it, I'm not moving mom to one of those places." That's where you get pandemics. So
Right.
Instead, let's have them stay at home. It's really okay. I'll stop there.
No, listen, I couldn't concur with the three of you any more than what you guys have said, and I'll just put a little bow on it and tell you that, or tell our listeners, live caregiving, there is nothing better, and that's the work that our four agencies do. We provide in-home care with live caregiving, but I couldn't agree more as it relates to, utilizing innovation and technology to enhance that live caregiving. That's the only way. That's a great solution, and I love, Daniel, that you quoted Andrea, innovate, innovate, innovate. We need to innovate. Our vision has always been to elevate the role of home care in the community-based segment, and I think the four of us have been able to do that. It's hard to believe it. The show is over. Thank you to the three of you. Make it a great day. Make it a great weekend. We'll be back next Friday.
There's no place like home. You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress Home Care Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit cypresshomecare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3